The impeachment inquiry enters its next phase after 12 key witnesses take the stand. What are lawmakers planning next in their probe of the president? Democratic Senator Michael Bennet joins me on set later this hour. We talk impeachment hearings and the state of his presidential campaign. And the NFL upholds Myles Garrett's suspension after a brawl on the field last week. Now Garrett's playing defense off the field. CBSN continues now. Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninen. Thank you for joining us. Congress is out of session until December after a busy 2 weeks of public hearings in the impeachment inquiry. 12 witnesses testified about the Trump administration's dealings with Ukraine. They included officials from the State Department, Defense Department, and National Security Council. Many described a potential quid pro quo. It's all centered around the president's July 25th call with Ukraine's leader. According to testimony, officials say that Ukraine would not get a meeting at the White House or nearly $400 million in military aid unless the country's president announced investigations into the 2016 election and the Bidens. Here's how some of the witnesses describe that call.
I found the July 25th phone call unusual because, in contrast to other presidential calls I had observed, it involved discussion of what appeared to be a domestic political matter.
It is improper for the President of the United States to demand a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen and a political opponent.
Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes.
Yesterday, 2 witnesses provided damning testimony specifically related to the president's interactions with U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland. Here's how former senior National Security Council official Fiona Hill described Sondland's role in U.S.-Ukraine policy.
He was being involved in a domestic political errand, and we were being involved in national security foreign policy, and those two things had just diverged. So he was correct, and I had not put my finger on that at the moment, but I was irritated with him and angry with him that he wasn't fully coordinating. And I did say to him, Ambassador Sondland, Gordon, I think this is all going to blow up, and here we are.
Hill's a Russia expert. She said that the allegations that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 election play right into the hands of Vladimir Putin. Another witness, David Holmes, is one of the top diplomats in the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. Holmes said that he overheard a conversation between the president and Sondland the day after the Ukraine call. He asked the ambassador about the call the next day.
Ambassador Sondland agreed that the president did not give an expletive about Ukraine. I asked why not. And Ambassador Sondland stated that the president only cares about big stuff. I noted there was big stuff going on in Ukraine, like a war with Russia. And Ambassador Sondland replied that he meant big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing.
Well, now Democrats say that there is sufficient evidence to draft articles of impeachment against the president. But this morning, Mr. Trump called into Fox and Friends, appearing confident that this week proved that he did nothing wrong. In the process, he criticized House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff.
Did you do anything that they can impeach you for?
There's nothing there.
Right.
In fact, they asked these terrible witnesses yesterday. Again, I don't even know these people. You know, I come to Washington. So you've had Bush and you have never Trumpers. Now, Schiff, remember this. He makes it all up. He's sick. There's something wrong with him. So he made up my phone call. He made it up. He made up a phone call. And then when I released it, everybody was embarrassed. And crazy Nancy Pelosi, who, by the way, is going to go down as the worst speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, she hasn't done anything.
Well, for a look at what comes next in the impeachment inquiry, I want to bring in Paula Reid and Siobhan Hughes. Paula's a CBS News White House correspondent. Siobhan is a Capitol Hill reporter for the Wall Street Journal. She's joining us by phone. So, Paula, we've learned that the White House is embracing this idea of a Senate impeachment trial. If it does come to that, give us a sense of what the White House would want that to look like.
We don't know exactly how this Senate trial would go down, but Rena, we're learning that the president's Republican allies may try to use this process to deliver on the president's desire for an investigation or at least a public discussion of the Bidens. At the heart of this impeachment inquiry is the president's effort to pressure Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. And now we've seen this week Senator Lindsey Graham sent a letter to the State Department requesting information about former Vice President Joe Biden's efforts to oust a Ukrainian prosecutor who is widely considered corrupt. That's significant because President Trump and other Republicans have continued to push this unsubstantiated allegation that the Bidens were trying to oust this prosecutor because he was investigating the company that Biden's son sat on the board of. Now, right now, it's not clear if this is the direction they're going to go, but those are the signals that we're starting to see. And clearly, Rena, if that's what Republicans do, that would only heighten the partisan tensions at the core of this impeachment inquiry.
Siobhan, I want to get you to weigh in as well. Do Republicans agree with the White House's vision for this trial?
Well, a couple of points of disagreement with President Trump. Number one, you heard President Trump today say he wanted Adam Schiff to have to testify in the trial. That is something that Republicans, by and large, don't agree with because that could set a new precedent in which Congress would end up investigating, hauling before committees its own members. So they see that as a non-starter. Another controversy, Trump said he wants to see the whistleblower testify in the Senate trial. That also is controversial. People like Chuck Grassley, who are strong defenders of whistleblowers, have said it's more appropriate to follow the law and not out the whistleblower.
You know, Siobhan, retiring Republican Congressman William Hurd kind of gave us a little bit of a preview at the hearings yesterday about how he might defend the Trump administration's actions.
An impeachable offense should be compelling, overwhelmingly clear, and unambiguous, and it's not something to be rushed or taken lightly. I've not heard evidence proving the president committed bribery or extortion. I also reject the notion that holding this view means supporting all the foreign policy choices we have been hearing about over these last few weeks.
So, Siobhan, you heard there, Hurd said that he disagrees with the foreign policy decision, but he believes it doesn't really rise to an impeachable offense. Is that sort of a line of defense Republicans are going to use moving forward?
Yes, that is a line of defense that Republicans are going to use moving forward. It won't be their only line of defense, but it is going to be a line on which people like Rob Portman in the Senate rely. Rob Portman, a co-chair of the Senate's Ukraine caucus, who could otherwise be in a difficult spot. So that is an out for a lot of Republicans. It's also worth mentioning here that if Will Hurd, a moderate Republican, is not going to vote to impeach the president, it's highly unlikely other Republicans would be willing to do so.
Paula, I'm curious, does the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, get thrown under the bus in all of this? We've, had several witnesses who said that Giuliani's actions in Ukraine were inappropriate, but they were loath to criticize him. And then today, the president defended Giuliani on Fox.
This kind of crap wouldn't have happened in the Justice Department if Rudy Giuliani was the Attorney General, just like I believe Bill Barr will straighten it out and straighten it out for good. But Rudy Giuliani was one of the great crime fighters of all time. He's also a friend of mine. He's a great person. He's like an iconic figure in this country for two reasons. He was the greatest mayor in the history of New York, and he was the greatest crime fighter probably in the last 50 years. When you're dealing with a corrupt country, if Rudy Giuliani, he's got credentials because of his reputation. When Rudy Giuliani goes there and you hear it's a corrupt country, I mean, it means a lot.
So, Paula, does the White House stand still that nobody did anything wrong?
Well, we have to separate how the White House views Rudy Giuliani to how the president views Rudy Giuliani. To be clear, he is still a member of the president's personal legal team, but he has told me that he's not supposed to get involved with anything related to Ukraine. Now, we heard right there, the reason he's still on the president's personal legal team is because the president still sees him as he was around 9/11. He still sees him as an American icon. And he believes truly that Giuliani brings credibility to his legal defense. But not everyone here at the White House sees it that way. Folks here at the White House have really questioned whether he's helping his client at all. Even publicly, the White House has been very quick to distance itself. Last week, when Rudy Giuliani published that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal trying to defend the president and the impeachment inquiry, the White House was very quick to come out, Rita, and say, no, he's a private citizen. He does not speak for us. We are not coordinating on this. And, of course, there's a larger concern about Rudy Giuliani within the Trump administration. The Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, is currently investigating Rudy Giuliani for possible illegal lobbying, foreign lobbying violations. So, I mean, that's the president's Justice Department. That is still part of his administration. So it's clear, even if the president believes he's one of the greatest crime fighters of all time, that opinion is not shared across this administration.
And on top of that, Paula, we've got counter investigations by the Trump administration ramping up. Remember, there was the FBI that originally investigated the Trump campaign and the 2016 2016 election interference. The Justice Department is also looking into sort of the beginnings of that investigation. And I understand there's a new development in the DOJ probe. What do we know?
That's right. Let's be clear about what this is. As you said, the Justice Department is investigating itself. The internal watchdog, the Inspector General, is reviewing the origins of the Russia investigation to see if there was any political motivation, to see if anything wasn't on the up and up. The Justice Department did the same thing for the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. We now know this report is going to come out in about 10 days. That's when we expect it to come out. The Inspector General will also testify shortly after it's released. Now, one thing I will say before we talk about what's come out in this report is, Rena, I've covered a lot of very high-profile Inspector General reports. The Inspector General does not leak. It is highly unusual. So most of the information we're getting so far is from people who have seen a little bit of this report. Some of the folks who are the focus of this report, they've had the opportunity to go and look at what the allegations against them, the evidence that was collected. They can also refute some of it if they want. So most of the leaks are coming out from people who have a real perspective or a vested interest in the outcome of this report. So I would caution folks, I think we're all going to get to see all the evidence. We're going to get to see the report, and we should probably hold off so we have full context. But CBS News has learned that a former FBI lawyer is under investigation for allegedly falsifying or altering communications that were used to support a FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page, former Trump campaign associate. Now, this was something that allegedly happened at the beginning of the Russia investigation. But because we don't have the full report, Rena, we don't have all the context for these allegations. And this is, of course, a very helpful, very convenient distraction for the Trump administration at this moment.
Yeah, a lot to consider when you're reporting this, Paula. You know, Siobhan, as Paula mentioned there, the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, Lindsey Graham, is seeking documents from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that relates to contacts that the Bidens had with Ukraine. What does that say to you?
Well, it says that Republicans very much want to keep the focus on Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Burisma. It's a way of deflecting from the impeachment proceedings in the House, from Mr. Trump's campaign on Ukraine, and putting the focus where Republicans would like it to be. And so it's very clear that that's going to be a central strategy in the impeachment hearings, even if the allegations about Joe Biden meddling to help protect his son are unfounded.
So, Paula, is it likely that the White House will allow Republicans to get these State Department documents, and how will they justify that?
It's going to be really hard because so far, even though the administration insists that all of the evidence that has come out has supported the president's version of events and his calls with Ukraine, the fact is that they've actually blocked most of the subpoenas for documents and witnesses who could help tell the story. So if now they're willing to kind of open the vault and turn over all this stuff for an investigation, a different investigation that they believe could help the president politically, they may have some explaining to do. Now, we could soon, though, get some clarification about how much the administration has to share. There is currently one, maybe two cases that could come down as early as next week that might shed some light on the extent to which the White House can actually block these subpoenas.
Paula, speaking of subpoenas, we know that former National Security Advisor John Bolton had some slightly cryptic tweets this morning. I want to read to you what he said. He said, "We have now liberated the Twitter account previously suppressed unfairly in the aftermath of my resignation as National Security Advisor. More to come, ... Is the White House worried about what Bolton might have to say about Ukraine? And what is he referring to about liberating this Twitter account?
There's no indication that his Twitter account was held hostage or under any sort of threat. There may be some confusion, though, having to do with his email address. As we all know, your Twitter account is often linked to your professional email address, particularly if you're verified. So there may have been some confusion there. It's not clear what he's talking about. But yes, within the White House, there is concern about what happens if John Bolton decides he wants to cooperate. He said that he is looking to see what the Supreme Court decides about the extent to which he and other current and former officials need to cooperate in this investigation. Rena, he's a pretty good witness for either side, really. I mean, he is a lifelong, he's a Republican. He was a member of this administration. He believed in a lot of what they were doing. But clearly, when it came to Ukraine, he had some concerns, specifically about Rudy Giuliani and the, quote, drug deal that he believed they were cooking up. He would have been someone who would have been in a lot of these meetings. He would have seen firsthand account of what was going on. So potentially, he could be quite damaging. But if the White House and Republicans insist they did nothing wrong, they have nothing to worry about.
So, Siobhan, looking at what Paula said, though, you know, if Bolton is waiting for this to play out in the courts, you've got Democratic leadership say, you know what, we're not going to wait for this to fight out in the courts and see what happens. Bolton's lawyer has said that he'd issue legal challenges to any subpoenas. Do Democrats feel that they have enough to start drafting articles, or do you think they're going to try and seek some other witnesses come December?
Democrats do feel that they have enough information to draft articles of impeachment. And talking to Democrats yesterday, they felt that the evidence was clear in terms of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. That said, many Democrats are having a private conversation right now about their eagerness to hear from people like John Bolton. And should John Bolton indicate that he was available, I would be surprised if Democrats did not avail themselves of the opportunity to hear from him.
Siobhan Hughes and Paula Reid, thank you both very much. And by the way, if you've missed any of the impeachment hearings, head over to cbsnews.com/hearings. You can actually go back and stream all 5 days worth of testimony in their entirety. You can catch up on all things impeachment anytime as well on our live blog, cbsnews.com/impeachment.